When Marine veteran Marcus Rivera returned from his third deployment in Afghanistan, he thought the hardest battles were behind him. He had no idea that his own family would become his greatest enemy. What started as his beloved sister Emma's dream wedding turned into a financial nightmare that would destroy his trust, drain his inheritance, and ultimately land his parents in federal prison. But Marcus had no idea that the FBI had been watching his family's illegal activities for months, and when they finally knocked on his door, everything he thought he knew about his loved ones would shatter forever. Before we dive into this shocking story of betrayal and justice, let us know where you're watching from today, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories. The morning sun streamed through the blinds of Marcus Rivera's modest apartment in Phoenix, Arizona, casting long shadows across the sparse furniture that marked the home of someone still adjusting to civilian life. At 28, Marcus carried himself with the disciplined posture of a Marine, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much during his 3 tours in Afghanistan. The Purple Heart on his dresser caught the light, a reminder of the IED explosion that had ended his military career and left him with a permanent limp and chronic pain that no amount of physical therapy could completely erase. Marcus had been home for 8 months now, navigating the complex world of Veterans Affairs benefits and struggling to find his place in a society that seemed to move at a different pace than the battlefield. The transition hadn't been easy. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams that transported him back to the dusty roads of Kandahar. But he was making progress, attending therapy sessions at the VA hospital and slowly building a routine that gave structure to his days. The apartment was small but clean, furnished with items from thrift stores and donations from veteran support groups. Marcus didn't need much. The military had taught him to live with the essentials. His most prized possession was a framed photograph on the kitchen table showing him with his squad in Afghanistan, all of them grinning despite the harsh conditions. 3 of those men hadn't made it home, and Marcus carried their memory with him every day. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, displaying his sister Emma's name. Marcus smiled as he answered. Emma had always been his closest family member, the one who wrote him letters every week during his deployments and who had been at the airport to welcome him home with tears streaming down her face. "Hey, Em," Marcus said, settling back on his worn couch. "How's the wedding planning going?" Emma's voice bubbled with excitement through the phone. "Marcus, I'm so glad you answered. I have the most amazing news. David proposed properly. I mean, we were already engaged, but he did this whole elaborate thing at the Grand Canyon yesterday. It was absolutely perfect." Marcus chuckled, genuinely happy for his sister. At 25, Emma had always been the family's ray of sunshine, working as an elementary school teacher and bringing joy to everyone around her. Her fiancé David seemed like a good match. He was a successful real estate developer who clearly adored Emma and had already proven his commitment to their relationship. "That's incredible, Em. I'm really happy for you," Marcus said. "So when's the big day?" "That's actually why I'm calling," Emma said, her voice taking on a slightly nervous tone. "We've decided to move the wedding up to this spring, April 15th to be exact. I know it's only 4 months away, but David found this amazing venue that had a cancellation, and it's absolutely perfect. It's this gorgeous resort in Sedona with red rock views and everything." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Sedona? That sounds expensive." Emma laughed, but there was something forced about it. "Well, that's the thing. It is expensive, more than we originally budgeted for. The venue alone is $30,000, and that's before flowers, catering, photography, all of that. We're looking at probably $80,000 total for everything we want." "Wow," Marcus said, genuinely surprised. "That's a lot of money, Em. Are you sure you need all that? I mean, the important thing is that you and David are getting married. right? I know, Emma said quickly. But Marcus, this is my dream wedding. I've been planning this since I was a little girl, and David wants me to have everything I've ever wanted. He says I deserve the fairy tale, and honestly, after everything we've been through with his family drama and my job stress, we just want this one perfect day. Marcus could hear the emotion in his sister's voice, and his heart softened. Emma had always been there for him, especially during the difficult times when he was dealing with PTSD and readjusting to civilian life. If anyone deserved happiness, it was his sister. "What about Mom and Dad?" Marcus asked. "Are they helping with the costs?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Marcus sensed something was coming that he wouldn't like. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about," Emma said carefully. "Mom and Dad are helping, but even with their contribution and what David and I have saved, we're still short about $20,000. And I was wondering—" She trailed off. "Wondering what?" Marcus prompted, though he was beginning to have a sinking feeling about where this conversation was headed. "Well, I know you have that inheritance money from Grandpa Joe sitting in your account," Emma said in a rush. "And I was thinking, maybe you could loan us the $20,000. I promise we'd pay you back as soon as possible. David's expecting a big commission from a commercial development deal in the summer, so we could probably have it back to you by August at the latest." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing what his sister was asking. The inheritance from his grandfather was indeed sitting in his savings account, $25,000, that represented his grandfather's life savings and his final gift to his grandson. Grandpa Joe had been a World War II veteran who had worked as a mechanic for 40 years, saving every penny he could. In his will, he had specifically left the money to Marcus with a note that said, "For my grandson who served his country with honor, use this to build your future." I don't know," Marcus said slowly. "That money, Grandpa Joe left it specifically for me to get on my feet after the military. I was thinking about using it for a down payment on a house, or maybe going back to school." "But Marcus, this is just a loan," Emma insisted. "You'd get every penny back, I swear. And think about it. This money could help give me the perfect wedding day. Grandpa Joe loved me too, and I think he'd want his money to be used for something that brings the family together and creates beautiful memories." Marcus felt torn. On one hand, Emma was right that their grandfather had loved her dearly. On the other hand, the old man had been very specific about leaving the money to Marcus for his future. The inheritance represented security in an uncertain, in time, a foundation he could build on as he transitioned to civilian life. "How much time do I have to think about it?" Marcus asked. "Well, the venue needs a deposit by next Friday," Emma said. "I'm really sorry for the short notice, but this opportunity just came up so suddenly. Please, Marcus, I've never asked you for anything like this before. This is the most important day of my life, and I just want it to be perfect." Marcus could hear tears in his sister's voice, and his resolve began to weaken. Emma had indeed never asked him for anything major before. She had been his biggest supporter during his recovery, visiting him in the hospital after his injury and helping him navigate the VA system when he first came home. "Okay," Marcus said finally. "Let me think about it over the weekend. I'll call you on Monday with my decision." "Thank you so much for even considering it," Emma said, her voice brightening immediately. "I love you, Marcus. You're the best brother anyone could ask for." After hanging up, Marcus sat in the silence of his apartment, staring at the photograph of his grandfather that sat on the bookshelf. Joe Rivera had been a tough, principled man who had raised Marcus after his parents went through a difficult divorce when Marcus was 10. The old man had taught Marcus about honor, responsibility, and the importance of keeping your word. He had also been the one to encourage Marcus to join the Marines, saying that military service would give him direction and purpose. Marcus walked to his laptop and logged into his online banking account, looking at the balance that showed 25,047.83. His grandfather's inheritance, plus a small amount of interest that had accumulated. The money represented months of careful planning and dreams of finally having some stability in his life. He had been researching small houses in affordable neighborhoods, thinking that home ownership might give him the sense of rootedness he had been lacking since leaving the military. But Emma's words echoed in his mind. This was her dream wedding, her one perfect day. She had been there for him during some of his darkest moments, and she was asking for help during one of the most important times in her life. The money would technically just be a loan. She had promised to pay it back by August, which was only 4 months away. Marcus spent the weekend wrestling with the decision, barely sleeping as he weighed his options. He called his best friend from the Marines, Tony Rodriguez, who was now living in San Diego and working as a security consultant. "What's eating at you, brother?" Tony asked when he heard Marcus's voice. Marcus explained the situation, and Tony listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, there was a long pause. "Man, that's a tough one," Tony said finally. "I get that you want to help your sister, but 20 grand is a lot of money, and honestly, 80,000 for a wedding seems insane to me. My wife and I spent 3 grand on our wedding, and it was perfect because we were surrounded by people who loved us." "But Emma's different," Marcus said. "She's always dreamed of this fairy tale wedding, and she's been through a lot lately with work stress and everything." "Has she though?" Tony asked gently. "I mean, work stress is normal adult stuff. It's not like she's been deployed to a war zone or blown up by an IED. I'm not trying to be harsh, but sometimes people get caught up in these fantasy expectations that aren't realistic." Marcus knew Tony had a point, but he also knew that his friend had never been particularly close to his own family and might not understand the bonds that Marcus felt with Emma. On Sunday evening, Marcus called his parents to get their perspective. His mother, Linda Rivera, answered the phone with her usual warmth. "Marcus, sweetheart, how are you feeling? Are you still going to your therapy appointments?" "I'm doing okay, Mom," Marcus said. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you and Dad about Emma's wedding. She asked me to loan her 20,000 from Grandpa Joe's inheritance." There was a pause, and Marcus heard his mother speaking to his father in the background. "Well, honey," Linda said carefully, "that's really between you and Emma. But I will say that this wedding is very important to her, and David is such a wonderful young man. They really deserve to have their dream day." Marcus's father, Robert Rivera, got on the phone. "Son, I know that inheritance is important to you, but family is more important than money. Emma has always been there for you, and this is a chance for you to be there for her. Besides, it's just a loan. You'll get the money back." "What are you and Mom contributing to the wedding?" Marcus asked. "We're covering the rehearsal dinner and some of the smaller expenses," Robert said. "Probably about 15,000 total. It's stretching our budget, but Emma only gets married once, hopefully." Marcus felt reassured, hearing that his parents were also making financial sacrifices for the wedding. It seemed like everyone was pulling together to make Emma's dream come true, and he didn't want to be the one family member who refused to help. Monday morning, Marcus made his decision. He called Emma and told her he would transfer the $20,000 to her account that afternoon. "Marcus, you are literally the most amazing brother in the entire world," Emma sobbed into the phone. "I promise you won't regret this. David and I will pay you back exactly when we said we would, and you're going to have the most incredible time at the wedding. We're going to make sure you feel so special and honored." That afternoon, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, staring at the online banking screen that would transfer $20,000 from his savings account to Emma's checking account. His finger hovered over the submit button for several minutes as he thought about his grandfather's words and his own uncertain future. Finally, he clicked submit and watched his account balance drop to $5,247.83. The money was gone, transferred into Emma's account to help fund what she promised would be the perfect wedding. Marcus closed the laptop and tried to ignore the hollow feeling in his stomach that told him he had just made a terrible mistake. The transfer confirmation email arrived in Marcus's inbox at 3:47 p.m., a cold digital receipt that made the reality of his decision sink in with uncomfortable finality. $20,000 gone with a few mouse clicks. He stared at the screen showing his depleted savings account, the numbers seeming smaller and more fragile than they had just hours before. The remaining $5,247.83 looked lonely in the account that had once represented security and possibility. Marcus tried to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest like a weight. This was family, he reminded himself. Emma had been there. For him, during his darkest moments after returning from Afghanistan, sitting with him in VA waiting rooms and helping him fill out endless forms for disability benefits. She deserved his support during her moment of joy, even if it meant sacrificing his own financial security temporarily. Within minutes of the transfer, his phone rang. Emma's voice was breathless with excitement and gratitude. "Marcus, I just got the notification. Oh my God, I can't believe you actually did it. I'm literally crying happy tears right now. You've just made my dreams come true." Her joy was infectious, and Marcus found himself smiling despite his lingering doubts. "I'm glad I could help, Em. Just remember, this is a loan. I'll need it back by August, like we discussed." Of course. David and I already talked about it, and he's confident about that commercial deal. 20,000 will be nothing compared to what he's expecting to make. You're going to get every penny back, probably even earlier than August. After they hung up, Marcus tried to return to his normal routine, but everything felt different. The apartment seemed smaller somehow, less secure. He had been living carefully on his disability benefits and the occasional odd job, knowing that his grandfather's inheritance provided a safety net. Now that net was gone, replaced by a promise from his sister and her fiancé, people he loved and trusted, but still just a promise. The next few days brought a flurry of excited phone calls and text messages from Emma. She sent him photos of flower arrangements, cake designs, and venue decorations. The wedding was taking shape into something spectacular, exactly the fairy tale celebration she had always dreamed of. Marcus tried to share her enthusiasm, but each expensive detail she shared made him more aware of where his money was going. "Look at these centerpieces," Emma texted, along with a photo of elaborate crystal and gold arrangements. "Aren't they gorgeous? They're $1,200 each, but David says nothing is too beautiful for our special day." Marcus stared at the photo, doing quick math in his head. If there were 20 tables at the reception, that was $24,000 just for centerpieces, more than his entire contribution. The realization that his $20,000 was just a small piece of a much larger expenditure made him feel simultaneously insignificant and exploited. His unease grew when he tried to call Emma a few days later, and she didn't answer. He left voicemails that went unreturned for hours, which was unusual for his sister, who typically responded to him within minutes. When she finally called back, she sounded rushed and distracted. "Sorry, Marcus. I've been absolutely swamped with wedding planning. There are a million decisions to make, and everything has to be perfect. The wedding planner needs answers like immediately for everything." "No problem," Marcus said. "I was just wondering how everything is going with the money and the planning." "Oh, it's going great. Actually, there have been a few small changes to the budget, but nothing major. The photographer we wanted costs a little more than we thought, and the catering company had some price increases, but David's handling all of that." Something in Emma's tone made Marcus pause. "What do you mean by a little more?" "Well, the photographer is an extra $3,000, and the catering went up by about $5,000. But like I said, David's taking care of it. We might need to adjust Few things, but we're not going to compromise on the important stuff. Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach, the same sensation he used to get before patrol missions in Afghanistan when intelligence reports didn't quite add up. Emma, where is that extra money coming from? You said you needed exactly 20,000 from me to cover what you were short. Oh, we're just shuffling some things around, Emma said vaguely. David had some money in investments that he can access if needed. Don't worry about it, Marcus. Everything is under control. But Marcus was starting to worry. His sister's evasiveness was completely unlike her normal transparent communication style. Emma had always been an open book, sharing every detail of her life with enthusiasm. This new, secretive version of his sister felt like a stranger. His concerns deepened when he received an unexpected call from his mother a week later. Linda Rivera sounded stressed and tired, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by something Marcus couldn't quite identify. Marcus, honey, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me, she said without her typical warm greeting. Of course, Mom. What's going on? Did you give Emma $20,000 for the wedding? Marcus hesitated, surprised by the direct question. She asked me for a loan, yes. Why? Linda sighed heavily. Because she came to your father and me yesterday asking for another 15,000. She said you had already contributed 20, and that David's family was putting in 30, but they still needed more money for unexpected expenses. The knot in Marcus's stomach tightened. What did you tell her? We told her we don't have $15,000, Marcus. We've already stretched our budget to the breaking point, covering the rehearsal dinner and your father's new suit and my dress. We're using credit cards for some of it as it is. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Did she say what the extra money was for? Something about upgraded flowers and a more expensive band. Apparently the original band cancelled and the replacement cost significantly more. But Marcus, I'm worried about Emma. She seemed almost desperate, and she was talking about the wedding like it was a matter of life and death. After hanging up with his mother, Marcus sat in his apartment, trying to piece together what was happening. Emma had told him she needed exactly 20,000 to cover the shortfall between what she and David had saved and what the wedding would cost. Now she was asking their parents for additional money, claiming there were unexpected expenses. Either she had significantly underestimated the wedding costs from the beginning, or something else was going on. Marcus decided to do some research. He called the Sedona resort, where Emma claimed the wedding was taking place, and asked about pricing. For events, the woman he spoke with was helpful and provided him with a detailed breakdown of costs for a wedding reception for 150 guests, the size Emma had mentioned. The numbers didn't add up. According to the resort, a premium wedding package for that many guests would cost around $45,000, including venue rental, catering, and basic floral arrangements. Even with upgrades and additional services, Marcus couldn't see how the total cost would reach the $80,000 Emma had claimed. His suspicions led him to start asking more questions. He called David's real estate office and asked to speak with him about a potential property purchase. The receptionist told him that David was out of the office indefinitely dealing with a family emergency, but she could connect him with another. Agent, family emergency? Marcus asked. Is everything okay? Oh, I probably shouldn't have mentioned that, the receptionist said, sounding flustered. I'm not supposed to discuss employees' personal situations. Can I have someone else help you with your real estate needs? Marcus declined and hung up, his mind racing. What family emergency? Emma hadn't mentioned anything about problems with David's family. In fact, she had been talking excitedly about meeting David's parents for dinner just the week before. The pieces of a disturbing puzzle were starting to come together in Marcus's mind. Emma's evasiveness, the inflated wedding, costs, David's mysterious absence from work, and now requests for additional money from their parents. Nothing about the situation felt right, and Marcus's military training had taught him to trust his instincts when something seemed off. He decided to drive to Emma's apartment unannounced, something he rarely did but felt was necessary given his growing concerns. The 40-minute drive to Tempe gave him time to think about what he would say and how he would approach the conversation. He didn't want to accuse his sister of lying, but he needed answers about where his money was really going. Emma's apartment complex was in a nice part of Tempe, with well-maintained landscaping and a pool area where young professionals often gathered in the evenings. Marcus had helped Emma move into the one-bedroom unit 2 years earlier when she got her teaching job, and he knew she was proud of her independence and responsibility. He climbed the stairs to the second floor and knocked on Emma's door. There was no answer, though he could hear the television playing inside. He knocked again, louder this time. "Emma, it's Marcus. I wanted to stop by and see how the wedding planning is going." He heard movement inside the apartment, and after a long pause, Emma opened the door. She looked tired and stressed, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, a far cry from her usual put-together appearance. "Marcus, what are you doing here? You should have called first." "I tried calling earlier, but you didn't answer," Marcus said. "Can I come in? I wanted to talk to you about a few things." Emma hesitated, glancing back into her apartment. "Actually, this isn't a great time. I'm on the phone with the wedding planner, and we're trying to sort out some last-minute details." Marcus could see past her into the living room, and there was no sign of any phone call or wedding planning materials. The coffee table was covered with what looked like bills and financial documents, and Emma's laptop was open to what appeared to be a banking website. "Emma, what's really going on?" Marcus asked gently. "Mom called me yesterday and said you asked them for more money. You told me 20,000 would cover everything you needed." Emma's face flushed, and she looked down at her feet. "There were just some unexpected costs. Weddings are more expensive than people realize." "Can I see the contracts and receipts?" Marcus asked. "I'd like to understand where the money is going." "Why?" Emma's voice took on a defensive edge. "Don't you trust me? I'm your sister, Marcus. I would never lie to you about something this important." But even as she said the words, Emma couldn't meet his eyes. Marcus felt his heart breaking as he realized that his sister, the person he trusted most in the world, was indeed lying to him about something. The question was what and how bad it really was. The tension in Emma's doorway was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus studied his sister's face, searching for any trace of the honest, transparent woman who had been his anchor during the difficult transition from military to civilian life. What he saw instead was a stranger wearing Emma's face, someone defensive, evasive, and clearly hiding something significant. "Emma, I don't want to fight with you," Marcus said carefully, "but something doesn't feel right about this whole situation. The numbers aren't adding up, and you're acting completely different than usual." Emma shifted uncomfortably, her hand still gripping the edge of the door as if she might close it at any moment. "I told you, weddings are complicated. There are always unexpected expenses that come up. David and I are handling it." "Where is David?" Marcus asked. "I tried to reach him at his office today, and they said he was out indefinitely with a family emergency." "What family emergency?" Emma's face went pale, and Marcus saw a flicker of panic cross her features before she quickly tried to compose herself. "It's nothing serious, just some issues with his father's business. David's helping sort things out." "What kind of business does his father have?" Marcus pressed, realizing he had never gotten a clear answer to that question despite Emma dating David for over a year. "Import and export," Emma said quickly. "Look, Marcus, I really need to get back to my phone call with the wedding planner. Can we talk about this later?" Marcus could hear the lie in her voice as clearly as if she had announced it. There was no phone call, no wedding planner waiting. His sister was stalling, trying to get rid of him before he could ask more uncomfortable questions. "Emma, please," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of his growing concern. "Just let me come in for 5 minutes. We can sort this out together. If there's a problem, maybe I can help." For a moment, Emma's defensive facade cracked, and Marcus saw something that looked like fear in her eyes. She glanced back into her apartment again, then stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind her. "Okay, fine, but let's go for a walk. I've been cooped up inside all day planning this wedding and I need some air." They walked in silence through the apartment complex toward a small park area with benches and a playground. Emma's nervous energy was palpable. She kept checking her phone and glancing around as if she expected someone to appear at any moment. Marcus had seen this kind of behavior before in soldiers who were hiding something or dealing with situations beyond their control. When they reached a bench under a large mesquite tree, Emma finally spoke. "Marcus, I need you to promise me something. Whatever I tell you, you have to promise you won't get angry or do anything rash." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Emma, what's going on? Just tell me the truth." Emma took a shaky breath and stared at her hands folded in her lap. "The wedding. It's not exactly what I told you it was." "What do you mean?" "I mean the venue, the costs, all of it. Some of it's true, but not all of it." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "David and I are in trouble, Marcus. Real trouble." Marcus felt the world shift beneath him as his worst fears began to crystallize. "What kind of trouble?" "David's business deals. They haven't been going well. Actually, they've been going terribly. He lost a lot of money on some investments, and then he tried to make it back with some riskier deals, and those went bad too." Marcus's military training kicked in, and he forced himself to stay calm and gather information before reacting. "How much money are we talking about?" "A lot," Emma said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "More than $100,000. Maybe more. David's been trying to fix it, but everything he tries just makes it worse." The pieces were starting to fall into place, and Marcus didn't like the picture they were forming. "Emma, where is my $20,000? Emma broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never meant for it to happen like this. David said he had a sure thing, a real estate deal that would double the money in a few weeks. He said we could pay you back and have enough for the wedding too." Marcus felt like he had been punched in the gut. "You gambled with my inheritance?" "It wasn't supposed to be gambling. David knows real estate. He's been successful before. This was supposed to be different. Where's the money now, Emma?" Marcus's voice was deadly calm, the tone he had used when interrogating suspects in Afghanistan. "Gone," Emma whispered. "The deal fell through. The property had legal issues that David didn't know about. We lost everything." Marcus stood up from the bench and walked a few steps away, trying to process what his sister had just told him. His grandfather's inheritance, money that represented years of an old man's careful saving, and his final gift to his grandson, had been lost in some foolish real estate gamble. The money he had planned to use for a house, for security, for building a future, was simply gone. "Is there a wedding at all?" Marcus asked, turning back to face Emma. "Yes, there's still going to be a wedding, but it's not going to be what I told you. We booked a small venue in Phoenix, and we're keeping it simple. The Sedona resort thing that was David's idea. He thought if we could make this deal work, we could afford the dream wedding and pay everyone back." Marcus sat back down heavily, feeling like the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. "Who else knows about this?" "Nobody," Emma said quickly. "Well, David's family knows about his business problems, but they don't know about your money specifically. And our parents don't know anything. David made me promise not to tell anyone until he could fix it." "Fix it how? You just said the money is gone." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. David has another deal lined up, a bigger one. If it works out, we can pay you back and maybe even make enough to have a nice wedding after all. Marcus stared at his sister in disbelief. Emma, listen to yourself. You're talking about throwing good money after bad. This is exactly how people end up losing everything. But David knows what went wrong last time. He's learned from his mistakes. With what money? You said you lost everything. Emma looked away, unable to meet his eyes. He's been talking to some investors, people who specialize in high-risk, high-reward deals. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. His sister's naive description sounded like she was talking about loan sharks or worse. Emma, what kind of investors? I don't know all the details. David handles the business side of things, but they're willing to front the money for the right opportunity. And what happens if this deal falls through too? What happens when these investors want their money back and David can't pay them? Emma's silence was answer enough. Marcus realized that his sister and her fiancé were potentially in much deeper trouble than just losing his inheritance money. They were talking about getting involved with dangerous people who might not be understanding if they couldn't deliver returns on investment. Emma, you need to call off this deal. Whatever David is planning, it's too risky. You could lose everything, including your safety. I can't, Emma said, fresh tears streaming down her face. David says it's the only way to fix things. If we don't try, we'll never be able to pay anyone back, and the wedding will have to be cancelled completely. Marcus realized that his sister was trapped in a cycle of thinking that he recognized from his military service. When people were desperate and facing impossible odds, they often made increasingly risky decisions in hopes of finding a miraculous solution. It was the same mentality that led soldiers to take unnecessary chances in combat, hoping to end a bad situation with one bold move. Where are Mom and Dad's $15,000 going? Marcus asked, dreading the answer. Emma's face crumpled. David needs it for the new deal. He says 15,000 could turn into 60 or 70,000 if everything goes right. And if everything goes wrong, then we lose that too, Emma admitted in a whisper. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, not just at David, but at his sister for allowing herself to be manipulated into this situation. Emma, you're talking about stealing from our parents. They're using credit cards to help pay for your wedding, and you want to gamble their money away too. It's not stealing if we pay it back. But what if you don't? What if this deal fails like the last one? Mom and Dad will lose their life savings, and they'll never be able to retire. Emma was sobbing uncontrollably now, the weight of the situation finally seeming to hit her. I don't know what to do, Marcus. David says this is our only chance to make things right. Marcus knelt down in front of his sister and took her hands in his. Emma, listen to me. David is not thinking clearly. People who are desperate make bad decisions, and he's leading you down a path that's going to destroy you both. You need to stop this before it gets worse. But the wedding, forget the wedding, Marcus said more forcefully than he intended. Emma, we're talking about your future, your safety, our parents' financial security. A wedding is one day. This could affect the rest of your life. Emma pulled her hands away and stood up. You don't understand. David and I love each other. We're going to get married no matter what happens, and this deal could solve all our problems. Marcus realized that his sister was too deep in denial to see the situation clearly. She had bought into David's promises and fantasies, and nothing Marcus could say would convince her to abandon what she saw as their only hope for salvation. Emma, promise me you won't take any more money from Mom and Dad, Marcus said, as they walked back toward her apartment. I can't promise that, Emma said quietly. If this deal works out, everyone gets paid back with interest. If it doesn't, well, we'll figure something out. As they reached Emma's building, Marcus felt the full weight of his helplessness settle over him. His sister was about to marry a man who had already lost Marcus's inheritance and was now planning to risk their parents' money on another desperate gamble. Everything Marcus had tried to do to help his family was making their situation worse, and he had no idea how to stop the disaster that was unfolding. The days following Marcus's confrontation with Emma felt like watching a slow-motion car crash that he was powerless to prevent. He returned to his apartment that evening with a crushing sense of betrayal that went deeper than just the lost money. The sister he had trusted implicitly, the family member who had been his emotional anchor during his darkest periods, had looked him in the eye and lied to him repeatedly. Worse, she seemed prepared to continue lying and stealing to fund David's increasingly desperate schemes. Marcus barely slept that night, his mind churning through possible solutions and scenarios. By morning, he had made a decision that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. He was going to warn his parents about what was really happening. He couldn't stand by and watch Emma manipulate their elderly parents into funding David's gambling addiction disguised as business investments. He called his mother early Tuesday morning, catching her before she left for her part-time job at the local library. Linda Rivera had worked there for 15 years, a quiet woman who loved books and helping patrons find information. The job didn't pay much, but it gave her purpose and supplemented his father's modest pension from 30 years as a city maintenance worker. "Marcus, honey, what's wrong?" Linda asked immediately upon hearing his voice. "You sound terrible." "Mum, I need to talk to you and Dad about something serious. Can I come over this morning?" "Of course. Your father's in the garage working on that old motorcycle again. I'll make coffee." The drive to his parents' house in central Phoenix took him through neighborhoods he had known since childhood. The modest ranch-style homes, with their desert landscaping and carports, looked exactly the same as they had 20 years ago, a testament to the stability his parents had worked so hard to build. Robert and Linda Rivera had bought their house in 1987 for $62,000. Making payments faithfully for 30 years until they finally owned it outright. It represented everything they had worked for: security, stability, and a legacy to pass on to their children. Marcus pulled into the familiar driveway behind his father's pickup truck, noting the new crack in the concrete that his dad would probably fix himself rather than pay a contractor. Everything about his parents' approach to life was careful, measured, and responsible. They had never taken unnecessary risks or lived beyond their means, which made Emma's request for $15,000 even more troubling. Linda Rivera met him at the front door with a concerned expression and a warm hug that reminded Marcus of childhood mornings when he would come to the kitchen seeking comfort after nightmares. At 64, his mother looked older than her years, the stress of raising children and managing household finances having etched lines around her eyes and silver streaks through her brown hair. "Dad!" Linda called toward the garage. "Marcus is here, and he needs to talk to us." Robert Rivera emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag, his weathered face breaking into the smile he always wore when seeing his son. At 67, Robert was still strong and capable, though Marcus noticed he moved more slowly than he used to and seemed to favor his left knee, probably arthritis from decades of physical labor. They gathered around the kitchen table where Marcus had done homework as a child and where the family had shared thousands of meals over the years. The familiar surroundings made what Marcus was about to tell them feel even more devastating. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something about Emma and this wedding situation, and you're not going to like it." Marcus spent the next 30 minutes explaining everything Emma had revealed to him: the lost inheritance money, David's failed business deals, the lies about wedding costs, and the plan to use their parents' $15,000 for another risky investment scheme. He watched his parents' faces change from confusion to shock to devastation as the truth sank in. Linda was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. She lied to us? About all of it? I think Emma believes that if David's next deal works out, everyone will get paid back and no one will be hurt, Marcus said carefully. But Mom, Dad, this is exactly how people lose everything. David has already proven he makes bad decisions with money. Robert sat in stunned silence, slowly shaking his head. $25,000, he said finally. Your grandfather's money plus what we were planning to give them. That's more than we make in 6 months. Dad, it gets worse, Marcus said. Gently, Emma said David is getting money for this new deal from investors who specialize in high-risk situations. That sounds like loan sharks or worse. If this deal fails, Emma and David could be in physical danger. Linda started crying softly, her hands trembling as she reached for a tissue. How did this happen? Emma was always such a responsible girl. She never asked for anything she couldn't afford. David happened, Robert said grimly. I never liked that boy. Too slick, too full of big talk about making money. Men who brag about their deals are usually the ones losing their shirts. Marcus had heard his father express doubts about David before, but Robert had always kept his opinions to himself, out of respect for Emma's choices. Now Marcus wished his father had been more vocal about his concerns. What do we do now? Linda asked, looking between her husband and son. Do we confront Emma? Do we refuse to give her the money? If we don't give her the money, she'll just find it somewhere else, Marcus said. And if David is really dealing with dangerous people, refusing might make things worse for her. Robert stood up and began pacing around the small kitchen, his face flushed with anger. That son of a bitch is going to destroy our daughter, and she's letting him do it. Marcus had rarely heard his father use profanity, and the vehemence in Robert's voice revealed the depth of his rage and fear. Linda continued crying quietly, mourning not just the money they were about to lose, but the daughter they thought they knew. There's something else, Marcus said reluctantly. Emma asked me not to tell you any of this. She made me promise not to get angry or do anything rash. She's completely bought into David's promises that he can fix everything with one more deal. One more deal, Robert repeated bitterly. That's what every gambling addict says. One more bet, one more chance, one more roll of the dice. The kitchen fell into heavy silence as the family processed the magnitude of the situation. Marcus watched his parents age before his eyes as they grappled with the reality that their daughter was lying to them and preparing to steal their life savings. Linda finally looked up, her eyes red from crying. Marcus, what would you do if you were in our position? Marcus had been dreading this question because he didn't have a good answer. Every option seemed to lead to either financial ruin or family destruction, and possibly both. Honestly, Mom, I don't know. If you give them the money, you'll probably never see it again, and you'll be enabling David's gambling. If you don't give them the money, Emma might find more dangerous sources of funding. What about going to the police? Robert asked. If David is involved with loan sharks or criminal investors, maybe the authorities can do something. With what? Evidence, Marcus replied. Everything Emma told me was vague. She doesn't even know the details of David's business deals. And she's an adult who's making her own choices, even if they're terrible choices. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Through the kitchen window, Marcus saw Emma's blue Honda Civic parking behind his truck. His heart sank as he realized his sister was about to walk into the middle of this family crisis. That's Emma, Linda said, quickly wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. What do we tell her? Robert asked, his voice tight. With emotion. Nothing yet, Marcus said quickly. Let's see what she says. Maybe if we give her a chance to be honest with you, she'll tell the truth. They heard Emma's key in the front door, followed by her cheerful voice calling out, Mom? Dad? I saw Marcus's truck outside. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking much better than she had the day before. Her hair was styled, she wore a pretty sundress, and her makeup was carefully applied. She looked like the successful young woman their parents believed her to be, which made the deception even more painful. "Hi, everyone," Emma said brightly. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Actually, I wanted to talk to Mom and Dad about the wedding timeline." Marcus watched his parents struggle to act normal while processing everything he had just told them. Linda managed a weak smile, but Robert couldn't hide his anger and disappointment. "Emma, sweetheart," Linda said carefully, "sit down for a minute. We need to discuss a few things about this wedding money." Emma's cheerful expression faltered slightly, and Marcus saw her glance nervously between her parents and brother. "What about it? I thought we had everything figured out." "Do we?" Robert asked bluntly. "Because I've been thinking about this $15,000, and I'm wondering if we should maybe see some receipts or contracts before we hand over that kind of money." Emma's face went pale, and Marcus could see her mentally scrambling for a response. "Dad, I told you what the money is for, the band and the upgraded flowers. Do you not trust me?" "It's not about trust," Robert said, though his tone suggested it was exactly about trust. "It's about being responsible with money." $15,000 is a lot for us, Emma. We want to make sure it's really necessary." Emma looked around the table, her eyes settling on Marcus with a mixture of hurt and accusation. "Did you say something to them?" Marcus felt the weight of his family's dysfunction settling on his shoulders. He was caught between protecting his parents from financial ruin and maintaining any relationship with his sister. There was no right answer, no choice that wouldn't cause pain and damage. "Emma," Marcus said quietly, "why don't you just tell Mom and Dad the truth about what's really going on with David and the money?" "I have told them the truth," Emma insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Robert stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the kitchen floor. "Emma, I've been your father for 25 years, and I know when you're lying to me. Whatever is really going on, it's time to come clean." Emma's carefully constructed facade finally cracked, and tears began streaming down her face. "You wouldn't understand. None of you understand what David and I are going through. Try us," Linda said gently. "We're your family. We want to help you, but we need to know what we're really dealing with." For a moment, Marcus thought Emma might confess everything and ask for real help instead of money. But instead, she stood up and headed for the door. "I don't have to listen to this," she said through her tears. "David was right. Family is supposed to support each other, not interrogate each other like criminals." She was gone before anyone could respond, leaving the 3 remaining family members sitting in the wreckage of their relationships and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The silence that followed Emma's dramatic exit hung over the Rivera kitchen like a toxic cloud. Marcus stared at the front door, listening to his sister's car engine fade into the distance, knowing that her departure marked a point of no return for their family. The easy trust and unconditional support that had defined their relationships for decades was gone, replaced by suspicion, fear, and the bitter taste of betrayal. Robert Rivera sank back into his chair, looking every one of his 67 years. The strong, capable man who had worked construction and city maintenance for 4 decades appeared suddenly fragile, diminished by the realization that his daughter was willing to steal from him. Linda continued crying softly, occasionally wiping her eyes with tissues from the box that had become a permanent fixture on the kitchen table. "What do we do now?" Linda asked for the second time that morning, her voice hollow with grief. Marcus felt the crushing weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. As the older sibling and the one with military experience, his parents naturally looked to him for leadership in crisis situations. But this wasn't a tactical problem that could be solved with training and discipline. This was family, messy and emotional, and infinitely more complex than anything he had faced in Afghanistan. "We need to protect you and Dad first," Marcus said, finally. Whatever Emma and David are planning, we can't let them drag you down with them. Robert nodded grimly. I already moved the 15,000 into a separate account yesterday, before Marcus called. Something felt wrong about the whole situation, and I wanted to make sure we couldn't access it impulsively. Marcus felt a surge of relief. His father's instincts had potentially saved them from financial disaster. Good thinking, Dad. What about your other accounts? Are they safe from Emma? She's not on any of our accounts, Linda said. We thought about adding her as a beneficiary, but never got around to the paperwork. Thank God. We need to change all your passwords and PINs, Marcus said. Emma knows enough personal information about you to potentially guess security questions or convince bank representatives to give her access. The next 2 hours were spent on the phone with various financial institutions, updating security measures and placing alerts on Robert and Linda's accounts. Marcus watched his parents navigate this process with a mixture of sadness and admiration. They were protecting themselves from their own daughter, but they were doing it with the same careful attention to detail they applied to everything else in their lives. As they worked through the security updates, Marcus's phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages from Emma. He initially ignored them, but the frequency and increasingly desperate tone finally made him check. Marcus, I can't believe you told them. You promised you wouldn't do anything rash. David says you're sabotaging our future. We had everything figured out. The investors are asking questions now. David says if we don't come up with the money soon, the deal is off. Please call me. We need to talk. You're destroying my life. Marcus showed the messages to his parents, watching their faces change as they read their daughter's words. The Emma revealed in these texts was someone they didn't recognize, manipulative, blame-shifting, and completely aligned with David's perspective rather than her family's well-being. She's not thinking clearly, Linda said, though her voice lacked conviction. This isn't our Emma. Maybe it is our Emma, Robert said bitterly. Maybe we just never saw this side of her before because she never needed anything badly enough. Marcus's phone rang, displaying Emma's number. After consulting with his parents, he decided to answer but put it on speaker so they could all hear the conversation. Marcus, thank God you answered, Emma said, her voice thick with tears. I need you to call Mom and Dad and tell them this is all a misunderstanding. David explained everything to me, and it's not as bad as I made it sound yesterday. Emma, what exactly did David explain? Marcus asked carefully. The money isn't really lost. It's just tied up in legal proceedings from the property deal. David's lawyer says we should get most of it back within 6 months, maybe sooner. Marcus exchanged glances with his parents. This was obviously another fabrication, probably something David had invented to keep Emma compliant while he planned his next move. What about the dangerous investors you mentioned? Marcus pressed. There was a pause before Emma answered. I was being dramatic. They're just regular business partners. David says I misunderstood the situation. Emma, listen to yourself, Marcus said gently. Yesterday you were terrified about dangerous people, and today everything is fine. Which story is true? The true story is that David and I are getting married in 3 weeks, and we need family support, not family sabotage, Emma snapped. If Mom and Dad don't want to help with the wedding, fine. We'll figure it out ourselves. Robert leaned toward the phone. Emma, this is your father. I want to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Is Marcus's $20,000 really gone? Another long pause. It's complicated, Dad, but David is going to make it right. That's not what I asked. Is the money gone or not? For now, yes, but thank you for being honest, Robert interrupted. Now, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your mother and I love you, but we will not give you $15,000 to throw away on another one of David's schemes. If you want to marry him, that's your choice, but you'll do it with your own money. Emma's voice turned cold. Fine. Don't blame me when you miss out on the wedding of your daughter because you were too selfish to help when we needed you. She hung up before anyone could respond, leaving the three family members staring at the silent phone. Marcus felt like he was watching his sister disappear before his eyes, replaced by someone bitter and manipulative who used guilt and emotional blackmail as weapons. "She's not going to give up," Linda said quietly. "Emma never gives up when she wants something." "What can she do?" Robert asked. "She doesn't have access to our money, and we're not going to give it to her." Marcus felt uneasy about his father's confidence. Emma was desperate, and desperate people often found ways to get what they needed regardless of obstacles. His military experience had taught him that motivated individuals could be remarkably resourceful when their backs were against the wall. His concerns proved prophetic when Linda's phone rang 2 hours later. The caller ID showed the name of Linda's sister, Patricia, who lived in Tucson and rarely called except on holidays and birthdays. "Patricia? What a surprise," Linda answered. "How are you doing?" "I'm confused," Patricia said without preamble. "I just got off the phone with Emma, and she told me some story about you and Robert needing emergency money for medical bills. She asked if I could loan you $15,000 and she would pay me back." Linda's face went white. "What exactly did she tell you?" "She said Robert had some kind of heart episode and needed surgery that insurance wouldn't cover. She was crying and seemed very upset. She gave me your account number and routing information so I could wire the money directly." Marcus felt sick. Emma was now actively stealing from extended family members, using their parents' names and fabricated medical emergencies to manipulate people into sending money. This crossed every line of acceptable behavior and moved into criminal territory. "Patricia, Robert is fine," Linda said shakily. "Emma lied to you. Please don't send any money." "What's going on over there?" Patricia asked, her confusion evident. Linda spent 10 minutes explaining the real situation while Marcus and Robert listened in growing dismay. Emma had provided accurate account information, suggesting she had access to financial documents or had memorized details from previous conversations. She had also crafted a story designed to trigger maximum emotional response, a medical emergency that required immediate action. After Linda hung up, the family sat in stunned silence. Emma's willingness to lie about her father's health and steal from extended family revealed a level of desperation and moral compromise that none of them had imagined possible. "We need to call the rest of the family," Marcus said. "Aunt Patricia might not be the only one Emma contacts." They spent the rest of the afternoon making calls to relatives, warning them about Emma's schemes and asking them not to send money regardless of what stories they might hear. Each conversation was humiliating and heartbreaking, forcing Linda and Robert to admit that their daughter was attempting to defraud family members. Marcus's uncle Tony, Robert's younger brother, was particularly blunt in his response. "Bob, that girl is out of control. You need to cut her off completely before she destroys the whole family." "She's still our daughter," Robert replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "She's a thief," Tony said, "and if you keep making excuses for her, she'll keep stealing until there's nothing left to steal." As evening approached, Marcus realized that his family was facing a complete breakdown. Emma had burned bridges with everyone who might have helped her, leaving herself dependent on David's increasingly desperate schemes. Meanwhile, his parents were dealing with the reality that their daughter was willing to lie, steal, and manipulate to get money for her fiancé's gambling addiction. The phone rang again around dinner time. This time it was Emma's landlord, Mr. Peterson, who managed the apartment complex where Emma lived. "Mrs. Rivera," he said when Linda answered, "I'm calling because your daughter Emma is 3 months behind on rent, and she listed you as her emergency contact. She owes me $3,600, and I need to start eviction proceedings if I don't receive payment by Friday." Linda's hand went to her chest as if she had been physically struck. 3 months. She never said anything about rent problems. "She's been telling me for weeks that her family was helping her with the money," Mr. Peterson said. "I've been patient because she seemed like a good tenant, but I can't wait any longer." After hanging up, Linda turned to Marcus and Robert with despair in her eyes. "How did we not know? How did Emma hide all of this from us?" Marcus realized that Emma's financial problems were much deeper than just David's failed business deals. She had been struggling for months, probably depleting her own savings to help fund David's schemes, and was now facing eviction from her apartment. The wedding money wasn't just about having a fancy celebration, it was about survival. "She's been lying to everyone," Marcus said. "Ask her landlord, probably her job too. Emma's not just helping David steal money, she's drowning financially and sees theft as her only way out." Robert stood up and walked to the kitchen window, staring out at the desert landscape that had been his view for over 30 years. "I don't recognize my own daughter anymore," he said quietly. "The Emma we raised would never do these things." "Maybe the Emma we raised never existed," Linda said through fresh tears. "Maybe we just saw what we wanted to see." As night fell over, Phoenix, the Rivera family, found themselves trapped in a nightmare of their own daughter's making, wondering how far Emma would go to get the money she needed and whether their family would survive the destruction she was leaving in her wake. The breaking point came 3 days later when Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. He was at the VA hospital for his weekly therapy appointment when his phone rang, displaying a number he didn't recognize. Under normal circumstances, he would have let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. "Is this Marcus Rivera?" a woman's voice asked, professional and serious. "Yes, this is Marcus. Who's calling?" "Mr. Rivera, this is Special Agent Sarah Chen with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm calling because your name has come up in connection with an ongoing investigation. I need to speak with you as soon as possible." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "What kind of investigation?" "I'd prefer not to discuss details over the phone." "Can you meet me at our Phoenix field office this afternoon? This is regarding financial crimes, and we believe you may be a victim rather than a suspect." Marcus's mind raced as he tried to process what the FBI agent was telling him. Financial crimes involving his name could only mean one thing. Emma and David's schemes had escalated beyond family theft into federal criminal territory. "I'll be there in an hour," Marcus said, already heading toward the hospital exit. The FBI field office in Phoenix was an imposing concrete building that looked like a fortress in the desert. Marcus had never imagined he would enter such a place as anything other than a visitor on a tour. The security procedures reminded him of military installations, metal detectors, armed guards, and the sense that serious business was conducted within these walls. Special Agent Chen met him in a sterile conference room, decorated only with an American flag and official government portraits. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with criminals and victims alike. Her partner, Agent Rodriguez, was younger but carried himself with the same professional authority. "Mr. Rivera, thank you for coming in so quickly," Agent Chen began. "Before we start, I want to be clear that you are not in any legal trouble. However, we believe you may have information relevant to our investigation." "What kind of investigation?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. Agent Rodriguez opened a thick file folder and spread several documents across the table. Marcus recognized bank statements, transaction records, and what appeared to be surveillance photographs. One photo showed David at what looked like a casino. Another showed him meeting with men in expensive suits in a restaurant parking lot. "We've been investigating a money laundering operation connected to illegal gambling and loan sharking," Agent Chen explained. "Your brother-in-law, David Martinez, has been under surveillance for the past 6 months. Marcus stared at the photographs, finally understanding the scope of what Emma had gotten herself involved in. David Martinez? Emma told me his last name was Richardson. The agents exchanged glances. That's one of several aliases he's used, Agent Rodriguez said. His real name is David Martinez, and he has a criminal record dating back 15 years. Fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. He's been very good at reinventing himself and finding new victims. Marcus felt sick as the reality hit him. Emma hadn't just fallen in love with someone who made bad business decisions. She had been targeted by a professional criminal who specialized in financial fraud. Everything about their relationship had been calculated and deliberate. "How much do you know about your sister's involvement?" Agent Chen asked. Marcus spent the next hour telling the agents everything he knew: the stolen inheritance, the lies, about wedding costs, Emma's attempts to defraud extended family members, and her increasingly desperate behavior. The agents took detailed notes and asked follow-up questions that revealed the depth of their investigation. "Mr. Rivera, what I'm about to tell you may be difficult to hear," Agent Chen said when Marcus finished his account. "We believe your sister Emma has been actively participating in David's schemes for at least 8 months. This isn't a case of an innocent woman being manipulated. She's been a willing accomplice." Marcus felt the last of his illusions about his sister crumble. "What do you mean?" Agent Rodriguez produced more documents from the file. "Emma Rivera has been opening credit accounts using stolen identities, including the identities of elderly veterans from the hospital where she volunteers. She's also been cashing fraudulent checks and moving money through multiple accounts to hide its origins." The room seemed to spin around Marcus as he processed this information. Emma volunteered at the VA hospital, reading to elderly patients and helping with recreational activities. Marcus had been proud of her charitable work, never imagining she was using it as an opportunity to steal from vulnerable veterans. "How many victims?" Marcus asked quietly. "At least 12 that we've identified so far," Agent Chen said. "Total losses are approaching $200,000. Your inheritance was just a small piece of a much larger operation." Marcus put his head in his hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his sister's crimes. She hadn't just stolen from family, she had systematically targeted and robbed elderly veterans, people who had served their country and deserved protection and respect. "There's more," Agent Rodriguez continued. "We have evidence that Emma and David were planning to flee the country after their wedding. They've been converting stolen funds into cryptocurrency and have been in contact with facilitators who help criminals establish new identities overseas." The wedding, Marcus realized, had never been about celebration or love. It was David's exit strategy, a final theft that would fund their escape before law enforcement could catch up with them. Emma's desperation about the wedding timeline suddenly made perfect sense. They were working against a deadline imposed by their own criminal activities. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "We're making arrests tomorrow morning," Agent Chen said. "David will be charged with multiple federal crimes, including wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. Emma will face similar charges, though. Her cooperation could potentially reduce her sentence." Marcus felt a complex mixture of relief and devastation. The nightmare his family had been living would soon be over, but the cost would be Emma's freedom and the complete destruction of their family relationships. "Will my parents' money be safe?" Marcus asked. "Your parents were smart to secure their accounts when they did," Agent Rodriguez said. "We've been monitoring Emma's activities, and she made several attempts to access their funds through various methods. She would have succeeded eventually if they hadn't taken precautions." The agents explained that Marcus would need to testify about his experiences with Emma and David, both to help with prosecution and to assist other victims in recovery efforts. They also informed him that some of the stolen money might be recoverable, though much of it had already been spent or converted to cryptocurrency. As Marcus left the FBI building that afternoon, he felt like he was walking through a dream. The sister he had loved and trusted had been living a double life as a criminal, targeting the very people Marcus had served alongside in the military. Everything about their family relationships had been based on lies and manipulation. He drove directly to his parents' house, knowing they needed to hear this news from him rather than from television reports or neighbors. Robert and Linda listened in stunned silence as Marcus recounted his meeting with the FBI agents, their faces reflecting the same devastation Marcus felt. "Our daughter is a criminal," Linda whispered when Marcus finished. "She's been stealing from old veterans while pretending to help them." Robert stood up and walked to the mantel, where family photographs were displayed. He picked up a recent picture of Emma smiling at a family barbecue, studying her face as if searching for clues he had missed. "I keep thinking there must be some mistake," he said. "This can't be the little girl who cried when she accidentally stepped on an ant." "People change, Dad," Marcus said gently. "Or maybe we never really knew who Emma was." The arrest happened exactly as Agent Chen had promised. Marcus woke up to news reports showing FBI agents leading David and Emma away from their respective locations in handcuffs. David was arrested at a luxury hotel where he had been meeting with potential money laundering contacts. Emma was taken into custody at the elementary school where she worked, creating a media spectacle that humiliated her colleagues and students. Marcus's phone rang constantly with calls from reporters wanting family statements and neighbors expressing shock and sympathy. He and his parents decided to maintain complete silence, referring all inquiries to the FBI and trying to process their grief privately. The legal proceedings stretched over several months, during which more details emerged about the scope of Emma and David's criminal enterprise. Emma ultimately pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges in exchange for a reduced sentence and cooperation with ongoing investigations. She received 8 years in federal prison, while David was sentenced to 15 years. Marcus attended Emma's sentencing hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom and watching his sister face the consequences of her choices. She looked smaller, somehow diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the weight of her crimes. When given the opportunity to speak, Emma offered apologies to her victims and family, but her words felt hollow and scripted. The most painful moment came when Emma's eyes found Marcus in the courtroom. For just an instant, he saw a flicker of the sister he remembered, scared, vulnerable, and desperate for forgiveness. But the moment passed, and she looked away without acknowledgement. In the aftermath of the trials, Marcus and his parents began the slow process of rebuilding their lives. The stolen inheritance money was never recovered, but Marcus found peace in knowing that justice had been served and other potential victims had been protected. His parents struggled more with the loss, not just of money, but of the daughter they thought they knew. Marcus returned to school using his GI benefits, studying criminal justice with the goal of helping other veterans avoid becoming victims of financial crimes. His experience with Emma had taught him that criminals often targeted military families, exploiting their sense of honor and loyalty for personal gain. The Rivera family never fully recovered from Emma's betrayal, but they found ways to move forward. Robert and Linda eventually decided to sell their house and move to a smaller place, using the proceeds to secure their retirement despite the financial losses they had suffered. Marcus bought a modest home near his parents, maintaining close relationships while all of them worked through the trauma of discovering that someone they loved had been capable of such cruelty. Emma remained in federal prison, and none of them maintained contact with her. Marcus sometimes wondered if she felt genuine remorse for her actions or if she simply regretted getting caught. He would never know for certain, and eventually he made peace with that uncertainty. The case became A cautionary tale within law enforcement circles about how financial criminals exploit family relationships and target vulnerable populations. Marcus occasionally spoke at conferences and training sessions, sharing his story to help others recognize warning signs and protect themselves from similar schemes. If this story has taught you anything about the importance of protecting yourself and your loved ones from financial fraud, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that reveal both the worst and best of human nature.